Okay, so in this video, we're going to go ahead and expand on what we did yesterday with area formulas and kind of connect that into some of the algebra that you learned last year. So we're going to be able to solve for some things that we didn't know before. So if I start off with a problem like this, where I know the area, but I don't know one of the sides, we're going to have to do a little bit of working backwards on this. So to start off with, on something like this, we might be able to think of this without doing in the actual algebra, because if we know that area is just base times height, well, 13 times what makes 75? That's just a division problem. We could just divide 71.5 divided by 13 to get an answer pretty quickly there. But if we want to see how this works with algebra so that we can be able to take this to the next level and eventually even practice some of the stuff we've got to do in Algebra 2 next year. So I'm going to start off by writing down my formula. Anytime you've got formulas, write down the formula, fill in the things that you know. Here we've got 3 variables. We should know 2 of them, and we can find the last one. So I know the area is 71.5. I know the base is 13, and I do not know the height, so I'm just going to leave that as x. And you can see there, that's about the easiest algebra equation you've ever solved before. If I've got 13x and I want x by itself, just dividing by 13. So do that. Now, I don't know what 71.5 divided by 13 is, but a calculator can do that pretty quickly. 71.5 divided by 13, and it tells me that is 5.5. So depending on whether they ask you for decimals or fractions, you can give your answer appropriately. But if they gave decimals in the original, pretty good bet that you are going to leave decimals. Then the last thing I forgot there, we should include units, right? Areas are always measured in square units like we talked about. If I'm finding the height is just going to be measured in normal linear units. So these are linear. Linear units just means that you can measure that thing with like a tape measure. It's a straight, not always straight, but it's a distance measurement. So height, base, radius, circumference, perimeter, all those are linear measurements because you could measure them with a tape measure, for example. Okay, moving on to this next one. Here we've got a much more complicated example because we've got a more complicated area formula. So again, I'm going to start off by writing my area formula. It is 1/2 times b1 plus b2 times the height. Now here we've got 4 variables, but we've got 3 things to plug. So the area, we've got 82.25. We'll go with 13 as base 1 and x as base 2, and my height of 7. Now there's a couple of different ways you could do this. I can go ahead and just show you a couple. My preference is just to start undoing stuff. So if I'm doing this, I'm just going to rewrite the equation so that I can work on it. So, okay, that's going to be annoying. So 82.25 equals 1/2 times 13 plus x times 7. So undoing stuff. I'm just going to go through and say, well, what's the opposite of this? So if I have this 1/2 times this thing, well, the opposite of taking half of something is multiplying by 2. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 to cancel that out. On this side, I'll have the 13 plus x times 7. On the other side over there, well, I'm going to probably want a calculator for that. 82.25 times 2 is 164.5. There we go. For the next part, how do I get rid of that 7? Well, that 7 is being multiplied. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by 7 on both sides. It'll cancel out there, leaving me with just 13 plus x on this side. Again, I'm not doing that in my head, so I'll pull up a calculator. This is where a good calculator can help you. Rather than typing that all in again, just I want to take that answer divided by 7, and it is 23.5. So I'll hit enter. Just got to get this thing to connect. 23.5. And then for my last step there, if I want to get rid of that plus 13, and I'm adding 13 to the x, I'm just going to subtract 13. So subtract 13, subtract 13. I can do that one. That's 10.5. And if I look back up at my original problem, that was in inches. So my base is 10.5 inches. Now that's probably pretty different looking than what you would have learned to do in algebra. Your standard way of doing this in an Algebra 1 type class is to simplify first. So I'll put this as like simplify first. And so in this case, I'm going to go through and simplify everything that I can. First thing I can do is, since all of this stuff is just being multiplied, I'm going to go ahead and multiply. I can multiply a half times 7. So that gives me 3.5. What I'm doing there is I can multiply, if I've got 3 things multiplied together, a half times this quantity times 7, I can multiply in any order, so I might as well multiply the 2 numbers that I know first to make my life easier. 13 plus x is still in parentheses. From there, I could distribute 3.5 times both of these. Oops, should write the right number down there. 82.25. I don't know what 13 times 3.5 is, so we'll go ahead and do that. We get 45.5. So I'm distributing that. Now we're back to a 2-step problem like you would have seen at the beginning of Algebra 1. So I'm going to subtract 45.5 from both sides. So I get 3.5x left on this side. And 82.25 minus, I'm just going to type previous answer, is 36.75. And then I will divide by 3.5 to get my final answer. No clue what that is, so I'm just going to take my previous answer divided by 3.5, and it is 10.5. So is one of those easier or better or faster? Really not at all. You can simplify first. You can just undo your steps. In this case, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. And honestly, they took almost the exact same number of steps, right? I had 1, 2, 3 steps there. Here I had 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So if anything, simplifying first, like you would learn to do in Algebra 1, probably took a little bit longer than just going through and undoing all of the steps. But your choice. Do make sure you put inches on those either way. Okay, a couple more examples here. I'm not going to go through quite as much. We have an example like this. This is just words, no picture. A triangle has an area of 64 centimeters squared or square centimeters and a base of 8. What is the height? So here, there's really no reason we have to draw this out. I'm going to start with just writing down my area formula and plugging in my numbers. So 64 equals 1/2 times 8 times h for the height. This is one place where simplifying first probably makes a lot of sense because 1/2 times 8 is just 4. And then I can just divide by 4. So 16 equals h. And again, I should be including units. 16 centimeters equals h, the height. Could you have just times 2 divided by 8? Absolutely. Would have given you the exact same answer. But because I happen to know 1/2 of 8 is 4, I didn't worry about doing that as separate steps. Last one, we've got one more trapezoid here. I want to just point out that just because you saw a trapezoid does not mean the steps are the same every time. Trust your algebra. This is all about algebra. Make sure you are trusting the algebra stuff. So I'm plugging in my numbers. 58.5 equals 1/2 times 5 plus 8 times x. Now this is one place where I absolutely would do some simplifying because 5 plus 8 in the parentheses, I know that's 13. So 58.5 equals 1/2 times 13x. And now I could certainly do 1/2 of 13 and write 6.5. Or I could just undo undo steps. In this case, it doesn't make any difference. It's just a matter of personal preference. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify. A half of 13 is 6.5. And then to get rid of that half, I'm just dividing by 6.5. Boom, boom. X equals. And again, you're going to, if there's decimals, you're going to end up at a point where you probably don't know what 58 and a half divided by 6.5 is. So we'll put that in a calculator. And it's 9. So that's nice. So we get 9 meters for our height. So again, the actual algebra steps are not something that you should be trying to memorize and remember. That's way too much. You find the area formula, you plug in the numbers you know. You better only have one unknown. Right? If you have more than one unknown, something went wrong. If you have no unknowns, something went real wrong because you probably plugged in something you didn't actually know. And then we trust our algebra. We can either simplify first and then solve, or you can start just undoing steps if that makes the most sense. But it's up to your algebra skills at that point. So really, if you're having trouble with those algebra skills, let me know. We can do some advisories, something like that, to work on those a little bit more.